Let's go fishing. This is part one of a two-part series where my buddy Dan and I went wading. This was my first time wading and he wanted to take me out and show me the ropes. We started off by fishing on top of this bridge, and that's because during low tide the water rushes through under this bridge, creating an easy area for predatory fish to feed on bait fish getting sucked out by the tide. So I threw the whopper plopper into the calmer areas but had no luck, so I threw out a paddle tail to try it out. And with no luck there, we walked down to the bank to start wading. I wanted to start with my chartreuse spinnerbait since it was a cloudy day, and shout out to my dad for gifting me these waders. And with no luck casting around the spinnerbait, I decided it was time to make a change. So I went back to the paddle tail and tried that out. But unfortunately I had no luck, so I went back to the bank to make another change, and I swapped over to the whopper plopper to fish the calmer areas. But after casting that a bunch, I also had no luck, and that's when I swapped over to the chatterbait. I've had good luck in other areas with this bait, so I figured it's worth a try, and after casting around I found a good area to try. I threw it over into some calmer areas and brought it back through the current, hoping to reach another calm area on the other side, and this was a high risk area because there was a big stump that I was going to get hung up on. But I decided it was worth the risk because I could always buy another bait, and that's when this happened. I felt the tug on the chatterbait and set the hook. It felt like a nice sized bass the way that it was fighting, and once it broke the water, that's when I realized I had a decent fish on. It wasn't close enough for me to net, so I walked into the bank, and would you look at that, a nice largemouth bass. Not bad for my first time wading, and since I was able to actually walk out into the water, I figured I'd film a release. Thank you for the bite, little buddy. There he goes. And with that success, I figured I'd cast out the chatterbait and keep trying. Even tried the paddle tail in the same area, but had no luck. It seemed that the only thing that was changing was the tide, as high tide was coming in and the current was rushing. So we decided to make a change and head to the other side of the bridge where it's better to fish during high tide. This is one of my favorite spots on an incoming tide. I had to go through the rotation, of course, and toss up the whopper plopper first, and then swap over to the chatterbait. But with no luck there, I even swapped over to the spinnerbait and gave that a couple casts. But unfortunately we had no luck there, so I decided it was time to swap again. I decided to try to fish a fluke. I usually fish these in ponds and lakes, but I figured this color would do well here with a lot of shad. But unfortunately we had no luck on that either. So I swapped over to a red crankbait, but I got that stuck in the tree immediately. I promise I don't suck too much at fishing, but I'm also not a professional. And I was interested to try this red crankbait because my buddy Dan had caught a lot of fish on this red crankbait here. From largemouth and smallmouth to even some catfish on the red crankbait, I was definitely excited to see what I could get. And especially after seeing a bunch of fish break the water, I wanted to give it a try. So I kept casting and casting in different areas but had no bites so far. And we had a lot of rain recently, so with the water rising I decided to crank the bait really fast to get it deeper. And that turned out to be a good choice because that's when this happened. And boom, fish on. And with the way that it was fighting, I had no clue what it was. But as soon as it broke the water, I knew I had a catfish on. Was shocked to see a catfish hit a crankbait, but was excited nonetheless. Stay tuned for part 2 to see what else we caught.